Well, pretty big side story happening today in regard to the ongoing lockdown over the Wu flu. Some of you might have seen a clip going around, or actually it was a very long press conference held by these two doctors in California who were basically saying, hey, we've heard a lot of medical professionals arguing why, the lockdowns need to stay on forever and why we can't loosen things up. And they said, hey, we're a couple of medical professionals. We have our own private practice here. And, we figured we should give our opinion, our professional opinion as doctors. And they made a pretty sober case as to, why the lockdowns were no longer necessary at this point. They didn't say anything radical like, fake virus, plandemic, open everything up because nobody's sick. Have you ever met someone who has this virus? They didn't pull anything like that. They didn't say anything remotely kooky that, or even could have been, portrayed as kooky by the mainstream media. All they did was, say the same things that all the other doctors are saying, but they didn't have as pessimistic of an outlook as everyone else did. Nevertheless, a lot of people, latched onto this and, were sharing it around and saying, hey, here are a couple of doctors who are dissenting from the mainstream, and maybe, there is a good reason, from a medical perspective, why we should start, ending these lockdowns, which have been so socially and economically destructive for not only America but other countries around the world. And in fact, I plan to do a video talking about everything they said, because they made good points. They were just pointing to the numbers and saying how, hey, the outlook's changed. We originally agreed with this whole lockdown situation, which, was further than I would be willing to go. I wouldn't say that I agreed with the lockdown from the beginning. I certainly thought that it was a good idea that people, not go out and go out to restaurants or cough on other people on a I certainly was someone who was very concerned about this virus far earlier than any of these, Karens on Twitter lecturing people about how they need to stay in their house, and all these celebrities going on and saying, hey, stay home and be safe, and all this, garbage and the popularization of this virus scare. And these guys point out that, they were ahead of the curve, too, on this. That back when, Fauci and the likes of them were still saying the risk remains low to Americans and that nobody should be concerned about this, and that, all these people were still saying, hey, you should go celebrate Chinese New Year. And you had that guy from the New York City Council telling everyone, hey, go to Chinatown, show the Chinese people how much you love them. You let that Chinese man spit in your mouth. When people were still making that case, saying that, hey, if you're worried about this virus, you're racist, these guys were ordering test kits so that, because they thought that there was going to be a big, rush and pandemic, even that would spread to America, and they wanted to be ready to be able to test their patients. And so even after all that, they went along with this. They were ahead of the curve, and they went along with, being worried about the virus and being very concerned for a very long time. And now they've gotten to the point to where they say, hey, this has gone far enough. They're not saying, oh no, we want to reopen the economy so that Mr. Trump looks good. They're not saying anything like that. They're saying we've been in support of all this stuff all the way, and now we think this is a good jumping off point. This is where we should start extracting ourselves. And so, my point is that they gave the most mild critique of the lockdowns possible. I guess the only thing that you can knock them for, optics-wise, is that they did start to stray a little bit, and they corrected course after they did this. But one of the doctors, I think Erickson, he basically said that the lockdowns at this point are not scientifically justifiable. And so, therefore, the fact that people continue to push the need for these lockdowns, they have some sort of extra scientific reasoning behind it. And so he was kind of alluding to the idea that this could be political, which, of course, it's very political. It's dumb that this is political. I don't look at this as political. I don't follow the political dimension of this. If you notice, I try not to talk about it too much, but it's especially, for the first couple months, because it was just, so dumb the way that people were turning this into a partisan issue. But in recent weeks, it's become kind of really, really hard to avoid it, because that's all that people are talking about. That's the only way that people think about this issue. And so I can see how if let's say a left-winger was watching these guys, that video, if you sent it to them, they would probably take that one clip and they would extrapolate from that. This guy says that the lockdowns at this point, that there's some ulterior motive. He must be a big Trumper and think that they all just want to take down Trump. And frankly, that's not even what I got out of what he was saying. I kind of got the impression that he was just saying that the government, likes having control over people, and that once they get their mitts on some more power, that they're very reluctant to give it up. Which, of course, is empirically true, if nothing else. There's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program, as Milton Friedman used to say. Again, a very mainstream person. So I fail to see, how anyone could portray this duo of doctors as, Alex Jones light. And yet, after accumulating about 5 million views on that video, it was taken down by YouTube. Why? Well, because it violated their terms of service, allegedly. Which, term of their service did it violate? Well, you're never going to know exactly, because that's how these social media companies are. They'll give you a strike or a ban or something, and they won't tell you what you did wrong, because then you can, if you know what the rules are, well, then you can strategically avoid breaking the rules, and they don't want you to do that. What they want is they want to be able to ban you for whatever reason they say without telling you, just because they don't like you. And that's very clearly what Google, through YouTube, because YouTube is a Google property, was doing here. This video was getting too much attention. These guys were getting too much popularity amongst ordinary people, which obviously they would if they got 5 million views. There's a lot of folks seeing that. They might even be changing some minds, and they were clearly making an impact, because a lot of people have been talking about these guys this week. And so YouTube thought that they could put the kibosh on that by simply taking the video down. And then all of a sudden, everybody was supposed to forget about these guys. Nobody would post a mirror of of their stream up on BitChute or something like that. Nobody would continue talking about these guys, and certainly no one would notice if they took the video down. Everyone would just stop talking about it. And so this was an absolutely idiotic idea on YouTube's part, because, what more could you do to promote these guys than this? Because if they weren't getting enough, attention as it is, this is a great segment that everyone, every sort of anti-media personality, which there's a whole, anti-mainstream media industrial complex in this country. Of people who are, to varying degrees, good or bad. A lot of them are grifters. But anyway, no matter what stripe you are, whether you're an honest person or a grifter or what, if you're someone who likes to rail against social media companies or against, ideas of censorship or any of this stuff, you're going to be talking about these two guys if you weren't already. And if you already talked about them, you're going to bring them up again. And so these guys are only going to get more attention. This video, whenever somebody posts a mirror, which I'm sure it's already up on BitChute, there's going to be, the spread of this video will continue. And so in my imagination, YouTube probably will in time see the error of this, and they might even put the video back up. But at the very least, internally, I think they're going to recognize that this was a dumb idea. Now, when it comes to censoring people on the internet, you have to be strategic about it. If you're too blatant, your censorship is going to backfire. That's it's the Streisand effect. Everyone talks about this. If Barbara Streisand hadn't sued that poor photographer and told him to take the picture of her house out of his photo book or whatever, well, then nobody would have noticed that it was her house anyway. But the fact that she made such a big deal about it drew everyone's attention to her house being in this picture. Now, the great irony here is that a couple months ago, these guys wouldn't have been censored at all. In fact, they would have been, squarely within the mainstream. And I'm not saying because their opinions were different 2 months ago. I'm saying because 2 months ago, or however many, maybe it's been more than 2 months at this point. I mean, the time's all blurring together. Not too long ago, the entire mainstream, as I pointed out, was totally unconcerned with this virus. They were telling everyone, hey, you're racist if you're worried about it. So these guys who are not that worried about it would have been, this was the mainstream opinion not too long ago. And back then, YouTube and the other social media sites like Twitter were banning people for being concerned about this. Your videos were being suppressed if you talked about this issue. If you even said the word, coronavirus, you would get instantly demonetized. And so the fact that they're even trying to enforce any kind of censorship here on this issue is dumb, because what the mainstream position is that you're supposed to hold keeps shifting. So a video that you made 2 months ago that was okay for YouTube today would not be considered okay, and likewise, a video that YouTube would approve of and not ban today, they might ban in 2 months, because then the conventional wisdom would have shifted again. All that you're doing by going against whatever the mainstream narrative is on this particular issue of the virus is you're just getting out ahead of what it will be in a couple months. It's kind of like I remember early on Chris Martenson kept saying that eventually we'll get to the self-evident stage. The what is it, the 4 stages of grief or whatever, or of truth, something like that, to where eventually the thing that people think is crazy today, everyone will accept in due time, in a very short period of time, as fast as this whole situation has unfolded. So in not too long, these guys will be squarely within the mainstream, and it'll seem totally ridiculous that their video was taken down. But that's the problem with when you're ahead of the curve. You just need to go with whatever the mainstream is saying at the time. You cannot have an original thought. You cannot dissent, even if soon enough everyone will agree with what you're saying anyway. Because ultimately, what all these measures, all this censorship is about is not about keeping people safe by, limiting misinformation. No, it's about, keeping people in line and teaching them that you're not allowed to think for yourself. It doesn't matter who is wrong or who is right. All that matters is that you say the exact same thing that everybody else does, and you listen when authority figures tell you something, and you regurgitate whatever it is you are told to think. And so the real term of service that these guys violated is, probably has nothing to do with misinformation or with, doubting the severity of the virus. What their real crime is insubordination. So with that said, if you gain anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.